Good morning, everybody. You know, we had a great day fishing yesterday. I was out with my wife Barbara, who of course caught the biggest fish. It was a beautiful mangrove snapper that you're going to see in a moment. And we're out with Louis, Harvath, and also Danielle, who was the sea deck guy in Canada. And three seniors, you can say. Two of us are about 65. Louis, 71, I believe. And my young wife, Barbara, she's between 25 and 30. I can't figure it out. She just looks so young. But anyway, we had a great time fishing, and we caught some really nice fish. So I'm going to show you the fish first, each one of them. And I'm going to show you a technique that I use when I'm down here in Florida. When I don't want to fillet the fish, I want to use them whole and either fry them in a frying pan or do them on the grill. So here we go. The first fish is, this is called a lane snapper. And you can see that it's beautiful colors. It's got, you know, the Florida yellows in there and everything. They've got a big mouth. I don't know if I can open them up because this guy's been in the cooler. They've got a pretty good sized mouth and lots of teeth in there. Okay, so they're beautiful fish, and this fish is literally a meal for one person. So this is called a lane snapper. The other one, which was the big snapper of the day, is the mangrove snapper. So this is the one that Barb got. And you can see how beautiful it is. Just look at it from the tip of the nose right back to the tail. They also call him gray snapper. And this guy has fangs. I'm going to try opening him because he can't shake now. See here, if I can just open his mouth. I got to be careful because it's a little rigor mortis. And without puncturing my fingers. Can you see those fangs? He's got fangs at the top, one or two, and lots of teeth on the bottom. So these guys really tear away at the bait that you use. They're like piranhas. And then the third one is like from the movie Nemo. This guy is Porgy. You can see he's got the beautiful colors at the front, high back. What I like about the Porgies is that they have a very small stomach cavity. So their stomach is only about this big right here. The rest is all meat. And their mouth is near the bottom. And they also have really nice teeth. They kind of remind me of a sheep's head. So let me see if I can open that mouth. It takes me a while here because I don't want to get hurt. So I don't know if you can see those teeth. Quite a set of teeth. So all these saltwater fish have pretty sharp teeth. Okay, so these are the three fish. I'm going to start off with this fish right here, the porgy. So here's the technique that I use. The first thing I'm going to be doing is using a scaler. So this is an inexpensive scaler. You can see it's just a piece of aluminum. It's got teeth on both sides. It's pointy at one end, and it's got holes to let the scales to go through, and kind of a handle to hold on to it. So these things cost about $1. You can get them at Walmart. So here's how I'm going to use the scaler, because I'm going to leave the skin on these fish. I start at the back where the tail is, and I want to make sure I get all the scales off. So if you look really closely, you can see that where the scales have come off, you just see the skin, and I can feel there's no scales. So you don't want any scales left on there, because the scales are like little pieces of glass if you were to get one in your mouth when you're eating the fish. So the first way that I go is go against the scales. I'm not going with them. I want to get most of them off. But I'm also going to go the other way too. The point of the scaler is really handy because in places like this, where they're tight, like underneath the belly, up here where the pectoral fins are, that point is perfect because you can get into these tight places and get the scales off. So I'm going to go like that, right all the way up to where the gills join here at the bottom of the throat. Okay, so you can see the white skin underneath. When I get around the fins here, I'm going at an angle. I'm not going 100% towards the scales. I'm actually going upwards, just like that. I'm going to hold it off the table so you can see. And it takes a little bit of work. You know, some fish have bigger scales than others. I'm doing that right to the top, like that. And I'm going to flip it over and do the same on the other side. And I'm taking you through the whole process because I want to make sure that if you're going to do this, that you're going to be doing it properly. So I'm doing it very carefully, and this is real time, by the way. We're trying to film this all in one segment so that you can see how we do each fish. So it's not just scaling and cutting the heads off, you'll see. So here, you can hear that sound. That means no scales. When it's that nice rubbing sound, make sure that I get around the anal fin here, again on this side, and underneath the pectoral. So now, what I'm going to do next, I have a fillet knife. This is one that's got some nice places for the finger to go in, the thumb and stuff, right here. So what I'm doing is I'm going to use that to actually help me when I make the cuts. And the first cuts that I'm going to make is going to be along the dorsal. So here we go. I'm putting the knife in right here. Very careful not to hurt myself. And I'm not filleting this fish, but what I want to do is remove that spine, because it really doesn't do anything for the eater of the fish. Okay, so I'm just going to go like that, down both sides. You can wear a glove, you know, to protect you. I'm going to put the fish down for a minute. And what I'm doing is I'm using the knife for leverage right at the base where it joins the handle. And I'm grabbing the spines, which are pretty strong. And I'm just using brute force to pull those spines up. Again, you got to be careful. I've done this quite a bit, so I've got a little bit of practice. You can see that some of those spines are pretty big. So I'm going to go like that. And I'm going to get that whole dorsal off. Just going to cut through in there. So I'm trying to leave most of the meat. You know, these aren't huge fish, and they taste so good that I don't like wasting any meat. You could fillet them, but the way I'm going to be doing them is whole. So you can see here, there's some, those are the vertebrae spines in there. The nice thing about having the dorsal removed, when you put some of your seasonings, and what I will do when I'm cooking, I'm going to use, you know, some roasted garlic, roasted pepper powder that I'm going to put on top, some sriracha sauce. When you put it in places like this, it actually helps to absorb the fish when it's cooking. So that's the first thing I'm going to do there. The next thing I'm going to do is do the same thing, but I'm going to do it on the anal fin. So I'm putting the knife in and going down to where the anal fin ends, both sides. The tail I leave on because when the tail, if the tail gets well done, I love the crunchiness of the tail. I know some people don't like eating any of the fins or tails, but to me it's like a big potato chip. Okay, so I'm using this as leverage. The last bone, which is right here near the anus, is pretty long. So I've got to go down a little bit with the knife, and then I should be able to pull it out. It's a long spine. Okay, so there we go. So here is that section of spine. This is called the anal ray, and this is that bone that I said is pretty sharp. See that big bone? So that's out of there. I'm just chucking that in the canal. So again, this is open for the seasonings to go through. Now the last thing that I do is I take my knife and put it in where the belly starts, and I go in between the two pelvic fins right up to where it joins the head of the fish. Next, I take my knife and I put it across diagonally, and I cut just behind the gills, and I go through from one side to the other, just trying to find the right spot, and I come right up. There's a lot of good meat right up here that a lot of times when you're filleting, you don't get this meat that's up here, and we call it the wings, you know, back home for some of our freshwater fish. And then I leave, this is called a cleithrum. I leave the cleithrum in there, and I go around it and right up to the top, and I go down right here, across. They've got a sharp bone that comes up, so you go around this bone that comes from the skull, just like this, there, because I want that flesh. And I'm going to cut in here, the cleithrum, and there, and I'm going to do the outline over here. You might say, well, why don't you just fillet the fish? You know, why go to all this trouble? Well, I like the presentation, believe it or not. When the fish is done on the grill, it looks really good. So I'm just going to break the cleithrum right there. And next, I'm just going to take the insides out. As I mentioned earlier, the nice thing about a porgy is that it doesn't have a big stomach cavity. It's just like this big right here. So this is all meat back here. And then I'm going to snap the vertebrae. That's snapped. That's taken off. The insides. A lot of people, you know, pick at the air bladder. That's this white thing right here. Well, you don't eat this part of the fish, even though you do put seasonings on there. So I just leave the bladder in there. I'm going to be washing this in a minute. So there's the piece of fish that's ready to go on the grill. The only other thing that I do, I rinse them off, which I'll be doing in a minute. But then what I also do, I make these cuts like this. Call them scour marks. And I do that so that the different things that I put on it, in this case roasted pepper, roasted garlic, a little bit of sriracha sauce, will go in. So you see these cuts, and you can see how thick the fillet is right there. So this will all absorb the nice flavors. So this fish will literally be done on the grill or in the frying pan like this, the way it is. Once it's cooked, you literally take a fork and take all the meat off. So there's no problem. And a really good tip that I like to use is to actually take these pieces of fish like this, put the seasonings on them, then put them in a Ziploc bag, and then put some sriracha sauce in there and mush them all around inside the bag and let them sit for about a day, even 2 days in the fridge. You know, it's kind of like when you prepare meats that you're going to be doing, you know, either on the grill. Sometimes when we do some certain types of meat like pulled pork and stuff, we'll do a rub and we'll let it sit there. So I do the same with the fish because it absorbs all the flavors and it just tastes a lot more. Okay, we're going to go to the next fish. Okay, the next one we're going to be doing is the lane snapper. That's this one here. I like cleaning the lane snapper because the scales are very easy to get off. Okay, we've done the porgy, and the porgy is in here. I've rinsed it off. You can see how good that fillet looks. See that? You can see all the scour marks right there. Beautiful. So let's go ahead with the lane snapper. So I'm going to do the same thing. I've got it laid down, and I'm going to start by going at the tail. Okay, so what I'm doing, this is the lane snapper, beautiful fish. I'm going to put my finger underneath the gill plate. I don't want to put it inside the gills because they're sharp. I'm actually going to use that to anchor it. And I'm going to use the scaler again, and I'm working it up the side. I'm going to go a little bit quicker this time. Okay, so different fish have different scales. The mangrove snapper, which I'm saving for last, has really armored scaling. So you got to work a little bit harder. So there's my fingers inside the gill plate and going up to there. So you can see that I'm working. Even though the fish were on ice overnight, because we ended up coming in just at dusk last night, and I was just exhausted to clean all the fish. You know, I had to clean the boat and everything else. So I said to my wife, I'm going to leave until tomorrow, and they're going to be in the cooler on ice, and the ice is still in there. So here's the other side. Quickly go up. The scaler really helps. You could use a butter knife or a fillet knife. You know, I've made scalers using like a bottle can top, where you take it because it's got the little ridges, and you nail it to a piece of wood, kind of like the size of the handle of this scaler, and because of the teeth that it has, you can take the scales off easy. So I've done that. Next, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take this dorsal out. So I'm going down one side to the tail, and I'm going to do the other side, just like that. When you get, it helps if you go down a little bit because you're not losing any of the meat, just so you can get the down to the base of the spine. Sometimes it's easier to put the knife in like that again, just enough to get the spines, and then start pulling up. So here again, I'm just using, you could use pliers, but I find for fish this size, you can work them with the knife. Just be careful. And I'm going to show you this time all of the bottom of the face of the rays on the piece that I pull off. Okay, so there is all the meat here with the dorsal spine there, and then here's all these, you know, spines that are here that really don't serve a purpose with very little meat on it. So we're chucking that in the canal. We're going to do the same with the anal fin, down one side and down the other side. And maybe I'll go down just a little bit, especially at the front here, because that's where the bigger bone is, just like we had on the porgy. And I'm just going to pull that out. And here, I'll just show you the difference, because this one, remember the porgy was like a hollow tube with a sleeve. Look at how long that spine is. So, and there's very little meat on the rays there, so that's going to go in the canal. So the next cut is at the bottom of the stomach cavity, in between the two pelvic fins, right up to the base of the head, across on both sides of the cleithrum, and I'm going to go right up like this to the top. I'm going to cut right here. This fish doesn't have that big bone like the Porgy did, so I'm just snapping it. It's still pretty tough, but with the base of the knife I can kind of get it in between the vertebrae and snap it like that. Okay, so I'm taking that off, twisting it a little bit, so, and cleaning this part off. Again, I'm not worried about the air bladder. That's that white, because this isn't going to be eaten. The inside is the flesh that's going to be taken off all the outside. Okay, so there's the fillets. I'm going to scour it about 3 or 4 times. 1, 2, 3, I may go 4. You can see how nice, even on this lane snapper, look at how nice and thick. That's all meat there, eh? And that's where all the seasonings are going to go. Same thing here, there, there. Okay, I'm going to give it a quick rinse. Okay, so I'm just going to hose this down, get all the scales off it. Make sure my cutting board is clean. And I'm going to lay it beside the other fish. It's actually good to have the fish in the water. I'm going to put some water in there, because it helps for any of the blood to come off. And then lastly, I'm going to be doing the mangrove snapper. So this is the mangrove right here. Look at, you can see because he's dead, rigor mortis, he's turned kind of a red color, but he's still a gray snapper or mangrove snapper. And let me tell you, they are great eating. So this guy has thicker scales. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pin it down again, and I'm going to work the scales off. Use a little bit of brute force here, because these guys are a little bit tougher, but I want to get them all off. You can see them flying off. Sometimes you got to have a shower afterwards. Otherwise you're going to find scales in some of the funniest places, because when they dry, you know, they kind of stick when they're wet, but when they dry they kind of fall off. So what you don't want to do is take scales in bed with you, you know. I'm going to do the bottom part right there. That's done. Flip them over just like that. You know, we've got a beautiful location here, because we've got the canal where the boat is up on the lift, just off to my right. I can clean the fish right here when we come in off the water. We're very blessed to be able to do this. Go out, catch fish, come back in, clean them, prepare them, enjoy them. So I'm going to go over. Sometimes you got to switch the angle, especially if the fish has been sitting on ice overnight, just to make sure that you get all the scales off. As you can see, some that are being a little bit more stubborn. There, those are coming off. These are coming off. And almost done. By the way, the water I'm using to rinse the fish is fresh water. So the fish will be ready to platter when I do that. So I'm going to go like that, make sure that's okay. Now, what's the next step? It's going down both sides of the dorsal fin. And all these fish, all 3 of them, have pretty long dorsal fins, almost starting at the head and going down to the tail. Other fish don't. That's why I see this tip of the knife is so important, to have a fillet knife that has a tip. It's going to go down a bit, almost to the spine, along the dorsal fin, so that it'll come off easier, separate it. You know, believe it or not, if you don't cut the fiber, it's a lot harder to separate the dorsal fin. So again, I go down only about a 1/4 inch until I can get to the base of it, and then I slowly use the blade and my thumb to get up to the top. So I've almost got the whole thing. You know, even if you're bagging fish to take home, we have some snappers that we'll be taking back, because we love to enjoy them up north. So there's the strip of meat with all the spines. So I'm going to chuck that in the canal. I cut the fish into 2. This fish would be cut probably into 2 sections to fit into a small sandwich bag. I learned over the years that packing less fish in smaller bags is better than packing a whole bunch of fish in a bigger bag, because if it's just my wife and I don't want to thaw, you know, enough for 2-3 meals all at once. I would rather do a meal at a time and keep the rest of the fish frozen. So again, I'm going to go right to that front one, which is the big one right there, and pop it out. Come on. There. You can see on this one too, that last ray is pretty long, so it can be pretty dangerous. So that's out. So I've done the top. Look at, you can see the vertebrae right there, all those spines. So when I put my fork in there to eat, that whole side is going to come off, and I don't like wasting any meat. The same thing with the bottom, so that really helps to start. So the last step that I do, go down here, put it in between the two pelvic fins. I can't stress how much that you got to be careful. You don't want to cut yourself, especially in salt water. It takes a lot longer to heal, even when you get like cut by a fish, or some of the terminal tackle that you use. Going down both sides, right at the base of the head. So you can see, using this technique, you lose very little meat. I mean, I know when we travel to the islands like the Bahamas and stuff, they don't even take the head off. They just grill the fish totally, on the grill. So there's the vertebrae snapped, and I'm going to take the insides out again. Leave the air bladder in there because it doesn't do any harm. Looks messy, but it's not too bad, let me tell you. There. And I'm just going to rinse this off. Grab my hose. All the scales are off. We've got the other fish there. And I'll show you here. We're going to platter them on 3 different platters. This is more than enough fish for my wife and I. Okay, so we're going to do that. And go here, here, and here. So there is the mangrove snapper. There is the lane snapper. And you can see they fill up the platters pretty good. And we have the porgy. So look at that. Look at each one. The porgy, the lane snapper, and this is the mangrove snapper or gray snapper. And I'll tell you what, it's a great way to present them if you're doing them on the grill. I forgot to do the scour marks here, so I'm just going to do that. 1, 2, 3. This guy's got the thickest fillet. Look at, I don't know if you can see here. Here, let me just cut down here. He's got the most amount of meat on him. I'm going to do this side too. 1, 2, 3. So all 3 of them are scoured. So it didn't take that long. I don't know, real time, I was talking when I do this, but if I was just doing it on my own, this would be done pretty quick. But it's a great way to salvage as much as the meat. Having the fish together helps keeping the meat together. And if I'm going to grill them, I do use a grill mat, and I just put some butter on the grill mat just for a little bit of extra flavor. The grill mat is nice because you don't have to use foil, and when you put the fish on the grill mat, it won't stick to anything. Then you can turn it over, so it kind of cooks in its own juices. If you're doing them in the frying pan, it doesn't matter. I usually use butter, but you can use a little bit of oil. I don't really deep fry these in the frying pan. I pan fry them, so that means a little bit of whatever you're using, whether it's butter or a little bit of oil, not floating in it like a deep frying. And I'll tell you what, these fish are so mild, they're delicious. I hope that helps you, and I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we have lots of tips. We put up 2 or 3 every week, and also shows, and give lots of tips on how to catch more fish. God bless you.